Board. We welcome to our May Town Council meeting. And we have a full evening ahead of us with lots of public hearings, several orders to deal with, a workshop with our attorney, and a special executive session at the end. So let's be efficient and move on and remind ourselves of the ground rules for meetings that are posted in the upper left-hand corner. And tonight I can even read them. Actually, I have a bigger copy in front of me. So roll call shows that Councilor Osha, Councilor Wingard, Councilor Gardner, Councilor Grenier, Councilor Mitchell, and Councilor Perry are present. I do not see Councilor Robertson yet. Agenda review. Are there any additions or deletions in the agenda? I think not. Approval of minutes of April 5th, April 12th, and April 16th. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
Move approval.
Second.
Second, moved and seconded. Any corrections, additions, or omissions? Someday we'll find one, but Nancy is so good at them, it's very rare. In that case, we'll take a vote on the approval of minutes of April 5, 12, and 26. And as Nancy is with us, she'll do a roll call vote, please.
Councilor Gardner,
In favor?
Councilor Osha,
In favor?
Councilor Grenier,
In favor.
Councilor Perry,
In favor?
Councilor Mitchell. Oh, okay. And Councilor Wingard,
In favor.
and the vote is 6 in favor, and there were none opposed.
Thank you, Nancy. Moving on to public hearings, we have a number of them tonight. Public hearing A is for a Class 11 malt, spirituous, and Venus liquor license, special amusement permit for music, dancing, and entertainment, and victualist license for Orono Football Pub Incorporated LLC, doing business as the Common Loom, 36 to 38 Main Street. Do we have any presentation?
Yes, this is Patrick Esty, Code Enforcement Officer, and staff has completed all inspections and is recommending approval.
Thank you, Patrick. Any comments for or against this license? I see no hands, so I'm assuming there are none. Then I'll close public hearing A, move on to public hearing B. A Class 1 malt, spirituous, Venus liquor license and victualist license for Chow Enterprises Incorporated, doing business as China Garden, 6 Stillwater Avenue.
And we have completed all inspections and we are recommending approval.
Any comments for or against the issuing of this license? None. We'll move on to public hearing C, tavern liquor license, special amusement permit for music, dancing, and entertainment, and victualist license for Timothy Gallen, doing business as Black Bear Brewery, 19 Mill Street, Suite 4.
We're asking for a conditional approval after the approval of a certificate of occupancy. A brand new kitchen has been created and we're just waiting for that to be completed. So we're asking for a conditional approval right now.
Thank you, Patrick. You'll have to remind me when we get to the consent agenda. Any public comments for or against the issuing of this license? I see none, so we'll close public hearing C. Move on to public hearing D. A Class 11 malt, spirituous, and Venus liquor license, special amusement permit for music, dancing, entertainment, and victualist license for Marg's Mex Orono LLC, doing business as Margarita's Mexican Restaurant, 15 Mill Street.
Staff has completed all inspections and is recommending approval.
Any comments from the public for or against the issuing of this license? I see none. So we'll move on to public hearing E. A Class 1 malt spirituous and Venus liquor license, special amusement permit for music, dancing, and entertainment, and victualers license for the Bears Den Memorial Union, University of Maine.
Staff has completed inspections and is recommending approval.
Thank you, Patrick. Any comments for or against the issuing of this license? I again see none. Public hearing, I'll close public hearing E and move on to public hearing F. A Class 1 malt spirituous Venus liquor license and a special amusement permit for music, dancing, and entertainment, and victualers license for Wells Commons, or Wells Catering rather, University of Maine.
And staff has completed all inspections and is recommending approval for this one as well.
Great. Thank you, Patrick, again. Any public comments for or against the issuing of this license? And we see none again. So public hearing G, ordinance amendment to the Town of Orono ordinances, Chapter 38, vegetation ordinance. And I think we're going to go to our town manager. No. Our public works director. Yay.
Yes. As we discussed in our community development meeting, committee meeting, I've been working with the tree board to revise the ordinance to more accurately represent operations and to make some improvements that the board felt were important. The new revision defines the purpose of the ordinance to regulate the planting, maintenance, and removal of trees located in the right-of-way or on any other public property like parks or areas around public buildings. The ordinance establishes the tree board and defines their responsibilities. It also, this revision actually expanded the membership of the tree board to beyond its original 7 members to include 2 associate members, much like the planning board has, to make sure that we always have the right amount of people to move our business forward. But also the board felt like there are so many talented and valuable opinions out there. We wanted to get as many as we could on the board. And so those associate members will be members of the board, but they would only vote if one of the 7 were not present for the board meeting. The ordinance establishes the responsibilities of the tree board to study problems associated with trees growing in the right of way. It also charges the board to work with staff to establish standards on selecting, planting, and maintaining trees in the right of way, to manage pests and disease infestations, and also to spearhead the public outreach that the board does so well. And speaking of which, they'll be coming up with we're going to be doing a little meeting with some members of the school at that on Arbor Day coming up on May 21st. So I wanted to stick that in there. It also establishes the tree warden. So that's my position. That's an appointed position from the town manager's office. I work as the liaison between the town and the board, and also work to regulate other parts of the ordinance, like issuing permits for maintenance or removal of trees in the right of way. I also am the final approval for executing the business of the tree board. So the board votes to have a tree removed or pruned. I'm the one who carries that through. The new ordinance also clearly defines the purpose of the ordinance is to preserve public trees. The goal of the ordinance throughout is to maintain a healthy urban forest. And there's all kinds of different aspects of that that the board works through, but that is the primary goal of the tree board, is to make sure that there are mechanisms in place to ensure that our public forest is, and particularly our urban forest, is healthy as it can be. To that end, the second half of the ordinance talks about management of disease and pest infestation. So diseases like Dutch elm disease or white pine blight or something like that. The ordinance allows the tree board to establish policies to help manage those, much like it did already with Dutch elm, but we wanted to expand that to include a wider variety of diseases and pest infestations, and to allow for the next one that comes along when, I think brown-tailed moth or the emerald ash borer is creeping our way and will be an issue. And this ordinance allows for the tree board to react to those appropriately within the constructs of the ordinance. The previous ordinance was very specific to Dutch elm's disease, which is still something that we need to be careful to manage appropriately. But the new ordinance allows us to expand activities to address new diseases and pest infestations as they come along. The ordinance prohibits damage to trees and allows the tree warden to act within a fining structure, and also prohibits damage of trees during construction activities, and allows the tree warden to work with contractors to help prevent that damage. We did have the ordinance, after we spoke at the committee level, reviewed, went through a legal review. I don't think there were a lot of changes. One of the comments noticed, or at least brought up, the sort of the redundancy of the Dutch elm language and the other more broad language to address other disease and pest infestations that might come along. And the tree board just felt that Dutch elm disease was such an important disease to manage. And since we know that it is in our community, we wanted to leave language specific to that in the ordinance so that there would be no confusion should we need to act on a new infestation. So that's pretty much a summary of where we are now. And I guess that's it.
Thank you, Robert. Any comments from the public for or against this ordinance modification? We spent a lot of time with it at our council meeting. I see none. Then we will close public hearing G and move on to public hearing H. And public hearing H is regarding the granting of an easement to Bangor Natural Gas across a portion of Webster Park and through an easement owned by the town for the Stillwater wastewater interceptor. And I believe Ryan Rancor from Bangor Natural Gas is with us tonight. Looks like he's joined by a colleague.
Thank you, Chair Perry. This is Jerry Livengood. I am a resident of Orono, but I'm actually here tonight on behalf of Natural Gas. I'm the general manager of the company, and we are requesting an easement for crossing a portion of Webster Park with the replacement pipeline. Also crossing over an existing easement or sewer main located on the property. And we certainly appreciate the council's consideration and cooperation on this important infrastructure project. And I believe we did send out a full slide deck May 5th of last week to members of the council and town officials. And we do have a slide deck presentation tonight that's a kind of a truncated version of that. to be respectful for the agenda, and you certainly have a full docket tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ryan Rancourt to walk through the slide deck. Any questions, we can certainly, both of us can take those questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Ryan.
Sorry, get myself unmuted there. All set. Can you guys see me all right?
Yes.
Ryan, you have quite a bit of feedback.
All right, how's that?
Better.
No volume on my end there. How's that? Can you guys hear me now? All right?
Mhm.
All right, perfect. And I'm trying to share my screen here. Are you looking at the presentation? Should be Magor Natural Gas at the top there.
Yes.
Perfect. I'll start the slide. All right, so as Jerry mentioned, we're here seeking the approval of an easement through the park. I'm Ryan Rancourt. I'm the manager of engineering with Bangor Natural Gas. First slide here shows the park area off the north end of the bridge of Webster Park, standing at North Main Avenue, looking back at the path. We did bring this to the council back on the 12th, and there's quite a few questions about what's the route going to look like, where are we exactly going to be, and the purpose of this presentation tonight is to really try to answer some of those questions that were asked the last time. So we'll run down through, and then I'm sure there'll be questions at the end, and we'll try to address them the best that we can. So this is an overview of where we are on the north side of the park. Nice corridor through the river, down to the river. We'll be about 50 feet off the bridge. And then on the right, we have a easement document that we put forward in front of the town, and it has those call outs in the 10-foot wide easement that we're looking for through the park. Just an overview of the area. On the left, we have an overview of our system. Marsh Island, which includes a large portion of Orono and also Old Town. In this island, you can see I have an area boxed out in red. The only feed onto this island is the line that's currently on the Brandon South Memorial Bridge. So it's a very critical line to our system to serve this area, including, it also includes service to the University of Maine. On the right is kind of that zoomed in area that we showed in red, closer into the bridge. And you can see just a rough, this one's just an overview. We'll show more detail in a minute here. But that red line with the proposed location being directional bored underneath the river and then routed through the park. So the project started, we had done some inspections, and we originally noticed that the hangars had been moving. So we came back in warmer summer months because the original inspections were done in the winter, so the pipe appeared straight, but the hangars showed some deflection in them. So we came back in a warmer summer month to actually see that deflection on the pipeline. And as you can see in this photo, it's quite a bit of a sway in the pipelines on the bridge. Next photo is a little bit closer. You can see that deflection even more at the hangars. So it started with taking measurements. So we had some data to be able to assess the problem and really determine what route we need to take with these pipelines hanging off the bridge currently. So with that, once we had the data in 2020, we sent that over to a consulting firm, EN Engineering. They have a team of engineers that looked at this that specialize in utility connections to bridge crossing. Ultimately, it was identified that the bridge these pipelines were installed originally without the expansion joints, which are necessary to compensate for thermal expansion. And it's ultimately thermal expansion of those pipelines trying to expand that are causing the pipe to bow the way that we're seeing. That does not currently meet code the way that they are. So it is a safety concern that we're trying to address and remedy on this bridge. So part of their recommendation was to, one, either directional bore a new line across the river, where the lines need to be completely replaced or install some type of expansion joint. So with that, we began looking at the two different routes at the same time to determine the best route moving forward. We started with the DOT to see what would be involved with the bridge connection. Ian developed a set of plans for us. And after reaching out to the DOT, this was the response that they sent back to us. This is an email from John Devon. He's one of the head engineers for Region 4, which is the eastern region of the DOT. And one of the things we wanted to highlight was their preference is to not have any type of utility connection on a bridge. It just creates conflicts later on with maintenance, and when that bridge needs to be replaced in the future, we would be in conflict with that replacement. Just while we're talking about permitting, we wanted to show that we have also reached out to Maine DEP, Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, as well as the Army Corps of Engineers regarding the boring of the Stillwater River. What you have here is the approval from each of those departments. And the last one on the screen here, the final approved permit from the DEP. So just talking a little bit about the expansion joints that we did look into about hanging on the bridge. We had Ian design it for expansion loops that you can see on the left. We submitted that to the DOT and they ultimately denied that request. The reason being that with expansion loops, we would have to offset underneath the girders that support the bridge. And they like to see the gas pipelines up between the girders to add an extra level of protection. So that route has been ruled out with the expansion loops. So leaving us with the slip joint style fitting to be able to route the pipeline up between the girders. So the problem with the slip joint, you can see it is a mechanical fitting. There's some gaskets in there that, and some O-rings that hold the gas tight. Over time, that will wear out and it would inevitably leak over time. So these are all some issues with hanging off the bridge. Another issue under that bridge, you might have seen it in the first photos where we showed you the pipeline, but there's these cross members that we hang off of. In order to move the pipelines up between the girders, which is this beam you can see on the right, that cross member piece that is supporting the pipelines would have to be moved up. So we would not just have to modify the pipelines, install new pipelines, we would have to make modifications to the bridge structure itself. With all of that, it would make for quite a lengthy project. We would have to take a lane on the bridge for, we're estimating up to 2 months. So it'd have a very great impact. So for that reason, and the DOT's preference, we then moved away from looking at routing the pipeline along the bridge and moved forward with bore routes underneath the river. Just one more thing we want to touch on the bridge, where they are now and where they would be relocated. They're very susceptible to vandalism. And I think this picture speaks for itself here. So you can see those two pipelines and very accessible right now to anyone who just wants to walk under there. So by routing the pipelines off the bridge, this would be an issue that would go away. So moving on to looking at different locations where we considered crossing the river with the high pressure steel lines. This one here, what you see in red is the board piece underneath the river. What's in pink is the routing from the board in pipeline back to the existing main, the supply for the town. That would connect back to that. And then what's in orange is the bore string. So the bore string, as long as the pipeline is under the river, we need that much more space beyond where the drill will exit. So in this scenario, the drill would sit on the south side where the red line ends, kind of near the bank, where that big retaining wall is, would have to sit in that area in the parking lot, I believe the town may own, and shoot towards the university inn. Shooting from the opposite direction, you can see on the south side, there's just nowhere to place that bore string with the retaining wall and the features we have to deal with if we were to shoot the other way. So on this, I guess, west side of the bridge, that's really the only option to set up the drilling equipment. And then with the bore string, you can see that would have a great impact to the not only the university inn, but multiple properties in the area, and routing that pipeline through several properties. So for that reason, this option was ruled out. Another option we looked at was setting up in the Summer Street Park area. Again, similar colors for similar pieces here. Drilling across would require us to then trench a new line up Summer Street, down Oak. And really, we end up right in the middle of the park with this option, which tends to be the area where people gather more. You can see the nice sunny area there in the imagery. And for this reason, we eliminated this option. Just too much impact to the parks really, because we would have to shut down Summer Street Park as well for the summer. So we ultimately ended up with the final option that we submitted for permit. The drill in this situation will sit in front of Marsh Island Brewing near Oak Street and shoot across the river to Park Street, roughly paralleling the bridge 50 feet to the east, and staying as tight as possible to the roadway to really minimize the impact to the park and maintaining access to the public. So with that, we're developing a traffic control plan that's due to be complete May 26th. So in the meantime, we've been working with our engineering firm that's working with the DOT. They have expressed to us their plan for the route to handle pedestrian traffic, and that can be seen in the dotted yellow line here in this photo. So you can see our work site outlined in the pink border, and the pedestrian traffic would be routed around the work site. So we will be looking to close the east side sidewalk across the bridge. We could use existing crosswalks on the south side of the bridge, as you can see in the left photo, move everyone over to the west sidewalk. And then when you get to the north, we would close off the existing sidewalk, and where you can see the yellow line on the north side of North Main Avenue, we would look at painting a new crosswalk, routing pedestrians on the north side of North Main Avenue for a short distance around our work area. We would have cones to protect them when they cross in that area, also maintaining 2 lanes of traffic. And once they get around that point of our work area, they would be free to cross back over to the existing sidewalk on North Main Avenue. So that is in the works, but generally that's the overview that our traffic control engineers gave us to handle pedestrian control. When it comes to vehicle traffic right now, we are looking at maintaining 2 lanes throughout the project, 2 lanes of traffic throughout the project. This is an image of our plan view for the proposed bore path. A little more details. You can see the survey work on here for the utilities that will need to be crossed. Essentially, on this bore path, we're just going to be crossing those sewer interceptors on either side of the river. And then as we come out of the park, you can see the 45-degree fittings. We will have to cross a storm drain and tie back to Route 2 in that area. This is a bore profile. There were some questions last time about how deep beneath the river we would be, so we wanted to just show that. Yeah, a lot of detail on this one. It includes that plan down the bottom right, and then you can see the detailed bore path at the top, and in the bottom left corner, that is the depth of each rod. So as they drill out, they'll drill out in 10-foot sections, 10 to 20-foot sections, and that table gives a breakdown of the depth that will be. So big red call out in the middle of the river, we will be roughly 40 feet beneath the base of the river, or about 50 feet beneath the water line. Just some closer details here of our work area. Again, you can see the pink line as our project limits the area we'll look to barricade. The gray is Jersey barriers that we'll put up to protect our crews. and the public from entering into that work area. And you just have some pieces of equipment. The lighter blue would be the drill rig. The red is excavators, and then you have a number of other pieces of equipment that's necessary for the drilling operation. Similar on the north side, excavator, Jersey barriers, vac trucks to handle spoils coming out of the park. So will that all be barricaded and contained in that work area? Looking at some of the equipment, we had questions about what does the equipment look like. This is the drill rig that we used up in Lincoln when we drilled the Penobscot River in 2015 or 16. That was a 1,200 foot bore, so a little bit longer. This rig here will be a little bit bigger than what we'll have on this setup where it is a shorter shot. But similar idea. You can see the rods coming out of it. It'll have a pretty large footprint, and it just pushes a rod 20 feet out at a time to drill across the river. Once we're across, then it would then attach the bore string and pull that back. This photo here is an example of what the bore string would look like. Again, on our project up in Lincoln back in 2015, 2016. In this case, we had a nice long field to stretch that bore string out in. So we didn't have to have any bends in it. You'll notice back on the previous slides, we did have a curve in ours. We can bend that to a certain extent, and that has to be limited to, I believe, a 250 foot bend radius for this size pipe. But similar idea, ours will just have a curve to it to match the curve of Webster Park and North Main Avenue to route the bore string down that sidewalk. Just some examples here of a silt bag. So what we'll do to make sure that none of the fine materials get back to the river, we'll protect the storm drains. We'll use silt bags and other methods for erosion control. Traffic control plan, as I mentioned earlier, that's in development. Yeah, I think we pretty much covered that earlier. So easements, you'll notice, I'm sure, that the pipeline is routed through two other properties. We currently have approval and agreement in place from Marsh Island Brewing. Very similar document that's been put in front of the town tonight. They've approved the easement through their property. And then another property, I believe it's 1 Canal Street. They have property that goes from the bridge over towards Canal and Summer Street. That has also been approved. So the final piece to really move the project forward and begin work so we can secure some materials is the final piece through Webster Park here. So just to recap, based off the studies that we've done, we believe this is the safest location for a pipeline when it's buried below the ground. HDD is a very common industry practice when facing obstacles such as rivers, highways, or railroad crossings. We have a similar project happening right now in Herman where we're going to drill beneath the railroad tracks in Herman. So we use this method quite often. And we feel it's the best long-term solution where eventually this bridge will be replaced. And if we are off the bridge, as the DOT had mentioned, that'll avoid a conflict in the future when the bridge is ultimately replaced. So I just want to leave us here with the final view we started with of the park. So the idea in our plan is, as you see it now, this is how it would look within a year once the project is complete. And the only difference, there would be a pipeline in this area that you wouldn't know it was there unless you just sat through this meeting or you've seen a set of plans that have been submitted to the town. So that's the idea, is to have as much or as little impact as possible with providing the best solution and long-term option to continue to provide safe, reliable service to the Orono Old Town area. And with that, I guess we'll take any questions.
Thank you for the presentation, Ryan. Very informative. I'm going to ask council members if they have questions or comments before we go to the public, and the public may have some questions and comments. So there we go. Questions from council members?
Yes.
Go.
All right.
Sure.
I apologize for coming in late. I'm having computer connectivity issues tonight. So I'm looking at I'll just tell you flat out, my concern is environmental. It always will be. I'm not a fan of drilling under a river. So I've done some research. I have also looked into that area, and I have heard that area is and I'm looking at your environmental reports and permits as well, is a critical habitat area for Atlantic salmon, and that is not what you found out. Is that true from your DEP permitting?
Yes, with Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, they came back and said that it is not a sensitive habitat area, but we would certainly,
It's not a critical habitat area.
that was their response, but we could certainly follow up with them on that.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to see that actually. And because it is a environmental impact, I think, when we start doing things like drilling under a river. My other questions are from the presentation or from the paperwork that we got ahead of time. It's the bridge connection. I'm just wondering, like, there's the I'm looking at your evaluation. There's the possibility, the pipelines have possibly seen stresses. The pipelines have possibly been plastically deformed. There's a lot of possiblies, and like may have. Is this like, has it or hasn't it? I guess is my question. These pipelines, are they stressed beyond limit allowed by code, or are they possibly stressed beyond limit allowed by code? I just wonder why that language is so fuzzy in that regard.
Sure.
In that evaluation piece.
Sure, if I can clarify on that. So that response that we put in front of you was from our consultant. Typically, when it comes to consultants, they don't like to commit one way or the other. They just give you I guess they put the information in front of you to make the decision. So for us, when we read possibly, we were treating that as, yes, it has been stressed. Yes, we do have an issue with the pipelines moving. And for us, our viewpoint is not possibly. They have been stressed to a point where we need to replace them. And that's why we're moving forward with this project.
Okay. And the foreseeable future, I'll be done in a second. I'll give the floor to another counselor. What is the foreseeable future that this bridge needs to be replaced, or is that a DOT question?
Yeah, so we have worked closely here with the DOT, several engineers. This bridge was originally built in the 90s. I want to say 92 is when it was constructed. So typical lifespan of a bridge would be somewhere between 50, maybe 75 years if it's really well maintained. It is well maintained, but it being built in the 90s, we are going to be approaching a replacement on that, according to them, maybe within the next 20 to 25 years. So
the next 20 to 25 years, that bridge will need to be replaced. Okay. Thank you. I have other questions, but I'll let other counselors go. Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl. Other counselors? Any questions?
I have a few questions. Well, we heard a lot about different possibilities, different plans. We could have, this is what would happen if we went on the bridge, and then we looked at this route and that route and all of the different routes. What did Bangor Natural Gas do a cost benefit analysis of what route or method would cost what? And if so, what did that analysis show you was the most cost benefit for Bangor Natural Gas? I'm curious.
Yeah, so really the cost benefit was broken down into two separate projects, one being hanging off the bridge, one being drilling the river. So regardless of the location of where we looked at drilling, the cost would be similar. Obviously, the longer the pipeline, the more costs that are associated with that. So yes, we did conduct a cost analysis, and this was the least impactful, with the reason being it's the shortest route, which will also be the least, so least cost, but also least impact to the surrounding properties.
I mean, I guess I'm curious also though, as compared to having to rebuild the pipeline on the bridge and then having to move it when the bridge is rebuilt in 20 years, I guess was my question.
Yes, certainly the drilling the pipeline and leaving it once is the most cost-effective option. Hanging on the bridge and moving it later would be very costly.
And my only other follow-up, and I did appreciate, the visual images, that was something that I brought up last time as a concern of, how is this going to impact Orono residents on their day-to-day life, particularly in the summer when that's a place where residents like to gather and enjoy that public space. And I did appreciate that. I did also notice that an awful lot of this presentation, it did talk quite a lot about the things that would be, expensive for Bangor Natural Gas or difficult for Bangor Natural Gas. And I appreciate that you're a company and you're trying to make a living. I get it. But also, I feel like we skimmed right over the environmental impact. And I think that that's the thing that a lot of Orono residents care deeply about. And especially when we get to the summation slide where it says least impact to the environment. And I wasn't quite sure what you meant by, this isn't an antagonistic question. I'm genuinely curious because I feel like we didn't hear a lot about how this is the least impactful to the environment. And if what you mean by that is surrounding properties, or if you actually mean it in an environmental sense.
Yes, thank you. And I apologize for skimming over it. We were just trying to move through it in interest of time, but certainly I could talk more about that. So when it comes to environmental impact, this line is going to be drilled beneath the river in solid rock, 40 feet beneath the riverbed. So the likelihood that you would even notice that, besides the equipment on either end, that anything's happening in that river, it's much different than, say, open excavation where there's going to be a lot of soil and material running into the river. Really, it's just coring a hole in solid rock that really contains all of the materials that we use to go across the river. So the river itself, there's really no environmental impact with the line being as deep and in the material that it is. Looking at the bridge, you can see we had coating on there. There's been most of it was red, but there were some green patches on it. Over time, what will happen on the bridge, not only if we move it once or twice, there's ongoing maintenance that will require us to sandblast that, collect materials that are then hazardous, not only to the people working with it, but the environment as well, that if you don't contain all of it, now that's falling directly into the river. And in my opinion, a much greater environmental concern than installing the line once and you never have to work on it again, versus every maybe 10 to 15 years, you're going on there to recoat the line and running the risk of having sand, paint chips, epoxy coating falling down to the river. So that's I guess our viewpoint when it comes to minimizing environmental impact. I hope that answers.
Yeah, I know we received quite a few letters from concerned citizens, particularly wondering about sediment and whether the drilling would cause that to stir up in the river. This was an industrial area for a long time, and I imagine that you're going to probably get a lot of those questions when the public get a chance to speak. So,
Jeff, you had your hand up.
Thanks. One of the comments that I received, I believe the person who wrote might have not known what kind of fuel is passing through the pipeline. So can you differentiate the difference between natural gas and gasoline, really basically, and then also describe what would happen in the event of a failure of the pipeline if it were on the bridge, and what would happen in the event of a failure of the pipeline if it's buried under the water?
Yes, so I think the first question was the difference between natural gas and gasoline. The major difference there with natural gas, it is a natural substance. It's primarily consists of methane. So if a leak were to occur, it would just be methane escaping, which is really no different than, say, the gas you'd encounter in a swamp or something like that. Higher concentration of methane, but really non-toxic and safe to be. We don't want it leaking, obviously, but it wouldn't be a contamination that you would have. That would be if this was carrying some type of petroleum product like gasoline, that'd be a major disaster. So if there were a leak, we're not talking about a major environmental disaster, certainly a problem on our end that we would need to fix and stop that leak. In our opinion, a leak within the river would be less impact. If there was a leak on the bridge, we would be shutting traffic down and rerouting traffic around, probably through Stillwater Avenue in Old Town. So if a leak occurred on the bridge, complete shutdown of Route 2 in that area. If it leaks in the river, I think we could assess the situation, maintain traffic where it's far enough away from the bridge. It all depends on where the leak falls, really, in that situation. But we deal with those types of situations on a daily basis. So I guess to answer your question, it would depend on the situation and how we would handle a leak.
I have another question that's unrelated to some of the comments that we received, but during the drilling and construction process, is there any impact on the water use? Would there be an impact to fishermen and kayakers and things like that?
Absolutely not. That would be open to the public.
Okay. And do you expect to need to do any, this is my last question, any shoreline mitigation? It looks like the drilling sites are far enough back that perhaps not, but do you expect it to have any impact on that shoreline zone at all?
No impact to the shoreline zone. So the closest we will excavate to the river would be on the Webster Park side. And you can see it's already been disturbed and excavated at one point when the sewer was originally installed. So we would be back behind that where the bore will exit. We'd cross that sewer and then all the excavation would occur in that area. When we do that, we'll have silt fences and measures in place to really handle erosion control to make sure that there's no impact to the river.
Okay, thank you very much.
Laura.
Thank you. Thank you for the more detailed slides that we, or extensive number of slides that we received before. I had a couple questions. The first of all being around like how we got here in the first place. And I'm reading from your slide. It says, closer investigation revealed the omission of expansion compensation devices when the lines were originally installed. So I have an interpretation of what that sentence means, but can you describe what that means from having written it yourself?
Yeah, when we wrote that, and again, everything that's in these slides, it's not just for me. We have a team here that's looked at this and a team of engineers that we've consulted with. So when I wrote that sentence, though, really the bridge, in our opinion, should have been installed, should have had some type of expansion joint installed originally with the design. For whatever reason, the engineers who originally designed this omitted that from their design, whether it was based on they thought that the pipe wouldn't change in temperature enough to need them. Whatever the reason might have been, they've since moved on, and what their reasoning was and why they omitted those, it's beyond us, but it's clear to us that they need to have that some type of fitting to account for thermal expansion. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, but so then in your presentation, because of these issues, the current situation that you're in, because they were omitted the first time these were installed, you've ended up in a place where they need to be fixed in some way. And what I'm understanding is that you have said that the slip pipe or the slip, I don't have the slide in front of me. What's the word?
Slip joint.
What?
Slip joint.
The slip joint isn't usable. And I guess I'm not understanding why that isn't usable if you now used expansion compensation devices.
Yes, and sorry, I must not have been clear when I went through that section, but yes, that is an option. So the option that has been ruled out is the expansion loops. So the expansion loops is no longer an option. The DOT has denied that design, which is forcing us to go with the slip joint style. It's not preferred to go with because it's a mechanical joint that will leak over time. But if we were forced to hang off the bridge, then that would be the type of fitting that we would have to use.
Okay, so I was understanding that as like a third option to like, so there's no, the slip joint with an expansion compensation device is the expansion, whatever it is on the other slide. It's the same thing that you're talking about.
Exactly. That's the type of device that would be used to compensate for expansion.
Okay, so it's not a third option, it's that same option. Okay. What other utilities run under the bridge? Are there any other utilities under there?
On this bridge specifically, there's a water line. And there's some power and I believe communication lines as well as city lighting for the bridge, which was added. I'm not sure when that was added, but Rob, I'm not sure if you know on that one, when the city lights were put on the bridge.
Yeah, the lighting was when they built the bridge in the early 90s.
Okay, so it was original. Okay.
So do we know, like, it's hard for me to understand what caused the damage to the current lines. And maybe this is where the possibly and the maybes came in. So it wasn't caused by a bridge defect or anything that the town has done. My understanding is that we've gotten here because Bangor Natural Gas didn't install expansion joints, correct?
The original line was not designed correctly. I believe in the original design, they had ruled out thermal expansion. The calculations they had done, they didn't expect to see the thermal changes in the pipe that we are seeing. So they were left out for that reason. It was done intentionally. They were considered, but for whatever reason, they were omitted from the design based on the calculations they made at that time. So once it was installed, real life situation, the pipeline is experiencing enough thermal change that it's causing it to compress and bow and buckle the way that we're seeing it. So yes, it was original design flaw by the company, and it's one that we're trying to fix now that we've observed it.
So have you identified issues? Because drilling under the river is a more permanent approach where you coming back and saying there's a design flaw is less easy to address. And so what are the potential things that you have considered as potential design flaws in this approach?
So in this case, the design has been reviewed by myself, but boring a line beneath the river is much more common and it's much more stable. When we look at maximum bending radiuses that we talked about for the bore string, that's also applied in this situation where we can only have so much curve, and that's why we have to sit the drill back, so far, not only to get the depth in the river, but we can only bend that line so much. So that is a consideration that we've looked at. So really, in this case, once it's below the river, the thermal temperature of this line is going to stay constant. And really the only consideration that's left is one, the stresses that are put on the line when it's pulled back, and two, the bending stresses that are on it once it's pulled through the ground, and that curve that you see in that bore log that we had sent over. So very different situation from hanging on a bridge, but we believe we have a good handle and a good design in place that we won't have issues moving forward.
So a couple more questions. I'm trying to understand kind of your goals versus our goals. Obviously, we want to have a safe community and we don't want to have a gas line that is unsafe and deteriorating. We also want to value our environment and the recreational assets and the natural assets of our community. and the economics of our community and the traffic flow and access. What I'm hearing for your goals are, this is the cheapest option and you want to be able to expand. Can you speak a little bit to what expansion this is opening up for you?
So less expansion for the company and more providing available service to the residents of Orono. You know, this line, without it, the university doesn't have gas. They're a very large customer of ours in the area. So it's really providing a service that is already in place and being able to ensure that that service can continue forward, as well as providing it to any other residents that wishes to use natural gas. So I'd say our main focus is certainly not the cheapest option, because we wouldn't be here today. Honestly, you know, why move forward with a project? It's a safety concern, and we're trying to address a safety concern here that we really think we're putting forward the safest and most reliable option possible.
So those were my questions, but I received a number of comments about sediment and safety of the river from people that go swimming, and their children go swimming in the river every day over the course of the summer, and the viability of doing this project now at the start of the recreational season for the river, or waiting until the fall to do it when people are not in the river every day. Can you speak to that?
Really, the installation will have no impact to the river. It's open to the public. Anyone can use it. Where the machines will be set up is located primarily along the roadway. So Summer Street Park, Webster Street Park is open. So really, I see no impact to anyone being able to swim. Even if they chose to swim right over where we're drilling, there's really no reason why they couldn't do that, as long as they're outside of our work area.
Okay, I'd like to move on and see if other councilors have any questions before we go to the public. Any other questions from councilors?
I think we had a question from the public that Roger Huber might be teed up to answer about the town's liability in the event of some type of a gas leak, either above ground on the bridge, I suppose, or below ground in the rocks.
Roger, are you able to respond to that?
I don't see the question. It says there's a question regarding town liability. I'm not sure I know what the question is.
Sophie, can you help with that?
Sure. So the question is, will the town take liability if there's a gas leak that harms residents? I think in general, along with answering that, I would just speak about your opinion around any liability that the town would take on regarding this project.
Well, I can tell you that the easement deed that is proposed contains a provision whereby Bangor Gas will indemnify and hold the town harmless for any demands, claims, expenses, judgments, awards incurred or imposed as a result of this pipeline. And I can tell you that would apply not only to Bangor Natural Gas, but any successors or signs of Bangor Natural Gas. So in terms of protections that the town has, and it waives any protections and immunities that Bangor Gas may have as part of this provision. So I think, I mean, it's pretty standard language. It puts the town in about the best position that it can be with respect to liability. It doesn't prevent the town from being sued, but the town can, you know, the town would certainly look back to Bangor Natural Gas on the strength of this provision to be made, to be held harmless. And typically the town would be taken out, and the insurance companies would cover for the town of Orono. So provisions being made for it.
This is Jerry. I'd just like to add a comment that Bangor Natural Gas is a regulated natural gas utility. So we fall under the purview of federal and state gas safety laws. Obviously, anything associated with the distribution of natural gas related to our operation of our distribution system would fall upon our responsibility as the operator per state code. And there is an indemnification clause, I think, on page 3 of the easement deed that does shift any liability associated with the pipeline to Bangor Natural Gas, in addition to the belt and suspenders approach of being a regulated gas distribution utility.
And Jerry, along those lines, one of my questions was, and I was trying to find it, who is the government agency? What is the government agency that has oversight over these gas lines or Bangor Gas?
So there's several layers. There's a state public utility commission that creates rules for natural gas utilities, distribution companies like ourselves. The predominant rule in the state of Maine is called Chapter 420. And then there is also the federal code under PHMSA, Part 192. Basically, that is the federal code, and that is the code of the land. And state jurisdictions can add more to the code, but they can never take away from the federal code.
Is there a federal agency? Is there a federal agency that has oversight?
Yes, Department of Transportation, ultimately.
DOT. And my other, I only had 2 more and that was it. And that was on the bridge connection remediation design issues pages that we have. And it was about the DOT would allow the pipelines to remain on the bridge, but they would prefer that they were removed instead. And that is because it's easier. It says it's easier for maintenance activities. And my other question along those same lines, these 2 slides, was that additional reasons to seek an alternative to reconnecting pipelines to the bridge was that staying on the bridge will require ongoing inspection and maintenance. Shouldn't it require ongoing inspection and maintenance? Shouldn't that not be a additional reason to seek drilling under the river, but it should be something that's happening all the time anyway? I was concerned about that statement.
I'll take that one. So we do have routine maintenance and operating tasks as a regulated utility. I will say that Bangor Gas has not had an operating issue related to a gas safety violation in well over, I think, 15 plus years. So there are routine tasks, and I apologize for the industry lingo. We kind of throw it around, you know how it goes. But we're always doing maintenance, leak survey, cathodic protection. So I think the overarching point, and Ryan touched on it, is that directional drilling under an obstacle is the preferred way to locate a pipeline within the last 10 years. Obviously, there's a number of natural gas pipelines across the country installed, hung on bridges, but that technology is, I guess, the option of hanging on a bridge versus the technology of directional drilling has just got to the point where it's a low cost, not only from an installation perspective, but also just it reduces ongoing maintenance issues associated with a pipeline that is hanging on a bridge. I mean, the reality is gas pipelines are buried because that's the safest place to put them. And that's why we've made the determination that this is the safest long-term place to locate this pipeline.
Thank you.
Is there an expected lifespan for a under the river kind of drilling pipe?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Jerry, if that's all right with you. So I see a comment here popped up too about cathodic protection, and that's exactly where I was going with this. So pipeline in the ground will have cathodic protection on it. So we have anodes, or we impress a current to protect the pipeline. So the current, essentially you have a sacrificial anode that would erode before the pipe. And then we take measurements quarterly, or actually monthly. We take monthly reads to make sure that the level, the voltage that's on this pipeline is adequate. And that's all, again, a regulation like Jerry mentioned. PHMSA, the DOT state regulation requires that we check the cathodic protection on this line periodically. So you have cathodic protection. The line beneath the river is going to be extra strong wall. So it'll be skid 80 pipe. So you have more material to start with. It's over designed when it comes to that. Extra wall means it's going to take longer to corrode if corrosion were to occur, but we have coatings on it, the cathodic protection. We're going to x-ray every weld that's on the line, 100%. We'll pressure test it to make sure there's no leaks ahead of time before it's installed. So with all this and following, I mean, really it's hundreds and hundreds of pages of codes that we're following when we designed this. With that and the ongoing maintenance, regardless if it's on the bridge, off the bridge, you're talking 100+ years for this pipeline with the protection that's on it. So
Thank you.
thank you.
We haven't really talked about the impact on the flower beds at the intersection of North Main Street. Can somebody address that? What's going to happen to them? How much impact to them? I couldn't really tell from the pictures.
Yes, there will be impact to the flower gardens in the right of way. We'll do our best to work. I had a call this morning with oh, his name's escaping me now.
Mitch.
Yeah, Mitch. Yeah, I called Mitch this morning. We want to work with the garden committee. It will be impacted during the installation. So we want to work with Mitch and the garden committee to bring that back to the way it is now. There will be disturbing construction, but essentially we won't stop with the restoration of that until they're happy with the final result.
And I had one other question, and I think you've really have addressed it in a way, but several of the comments from the public that we've received were very concerned about disturbing the bottom of the river because of trace elements or toxins that might be there that might now be inactive because they're buried, but if exposed to oxygen might become problematic. Are you assuring us that there is no chance of disturbing the bottom of the riverbed?
Yes, that's correct. We're going to be 40 feet beneath the riverbed in solid rock. So we will not be disturbing any of the material that is on the base. No gravel. Will be well into solid rock when we're drilling the river.
Any other questions from council? Then let's see if we have some public questions. And Belle, you may have to help me with this. I don't see hands.
So I don't see any hands raised yet.
Oh, I do.
There's one right now. So Sonia is going to be speaking.
Go right ahead, Sonia.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for the informative presentation and for all the really thoughtful questions from council members so far. My question wants to zoom just a step back and think about the fact that, you know, we're proposing infrastructure that will be here for the next 100 years and would facilitate our continued dependence on fossil fuels for the next 100 years. And I think that that's, you know, an important question to raise. You know, is this the kind of infrastructure that we want in our town, and the credence we want to give taking climate change seriously in our town? Natural gas is really kind of a greenwashy term. Yes, it's naturally occurring, but it's an incredibly potent greenhouse gas and a major contributor to climate change. And calling it natural sort of dodges the issue that it does cause climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Any response? Okay. I saw Virginia Hackney's hand up as well. Virginia, can you put her on?
Yes, she's allowed to speak now.
Thank you. Go right ahead, Virginia.
Hi, I've had natural gas drilled under the ground by my house and it was perfectly innocuous. Didn't hurt my trees, didn't really hurt much of the access to the house. But I would love to see, as part of a whole team of people that work on these gardens, I would love to see an overhead view of that intersection there. You have an obsolete map in which the garden that was taken out and was replaced is not seen. The new garden goes along the guardrail, and none of your slides that we saw out here show that. Do you have a slide that shows the intersection? It would be like the intersection between North Main Avenue and Route 2?
Yes, I apologize for that. The imagery that we use is Google Earth imagery, so it's satellite imagery, and where that was just redone a year or two ago, unfortunately, I don't have imagery similar to that. We may have some photos, but I don't have those readily available. We'll certainly take photos so we know what it looks like beforehand, and we can put it back when we're done.
Could you just take a piece of paper right there and just make me a little sketch? It might calm everybody down a little so we could see where it goes through the river.
I'm not sure if I still. Oh,
and,
sorry.
and then where it goes through the garden. I mean, I know that the garden is like small potatoes compared to the rest of this. And I understand it's a real safety issue. I don't have any problem with that. But I'm just curious now what we have to do to save our work in the garden.
I'm not sure if I can share my screen still or not. Are you guys able to see the presentation again?
Yes.
Yes.
So the first slide here, over towards the right. Sorry, I got screens blocking my screen. So the easement drawing on the right, if I zoom in, do you guys see that?
Yep.
Is it getting large? Okay.
Yep.
All right, so where the easement, where this orange line ends, you can see the guardrail that comes around the corner. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse or not either, but there's
you can.
dashed line in here. That is the guardrail. So the garden that you're looking at would be between the sidewalk and that guardrail, as Virginia mentioned here. So the pipeline would come up through and route over this way. Unfortunately, when we dig through here, it is going to be quite disturbed. So we're prepared to work with the garden club, be that working directly with you or hiring a landscaper to put it back to as is, or making some type of donation to the garden club. Certainly we want to see that return to the way it is now. We understand you've worked hard and it looks great out there. We want to see it go back to the condition it was left in.
Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to know.
Can I ask a question? I'm with Virginia. I'm her husband. I'm sitting here at the same time.
Sure. Go right ahead.
Thank you. There's some perennials in there that we're trying to, they take time to grow. And I can't really tell. It looks like it's going to run right through the winterberries that I've been coddling for 2 years now, and they don't like to be moved. And I guess the question is, there's no way you can do your boring under the garden or run it around the other end of the garden?
Yeah, so the issue with boring in this location, you can see that the size of the equipment and the room needed for a bore string takes up quite a bit of room. So really to bore in this location, we'd have to shut down Route 2 or set up in either way. I don't think you're getting around shutting down Route 2 to be able to drill something like that. So it's really not a practical location to be able to drill without major impacts to traffic and the roadway. In there, we have picked the spa. You can kind of see some trees in the image there. So we were trying to also minimize the impact to the trees as we went through the park. We talked about maybe tying it further towards the south side of the
So this is
side of
less on the street.
but we would ultimately have issues running into trees or other utilities or having to deal with the steep bank coming out through. And ultimately, I don't really see a way around of impacting the garden. So certainly we want to work with you and put it back. And if there's some, I missed that type of the plant that you mentioned, but certainly want to see those grow. And we don't want to be the reason why they don't take. So certainly if there's something we can do to minimize that, we would look at doing it. But unfortunately, I think this is the location the pipeline will need to be routed.
Is there some way you can excavate it so that you don't have piles of dirt on either side of it? I mean, you know, like those things they put in the ditch that keep the walls from caving in. Can you put one of those in there and then just not have dirt piled on either side of it?
Yeah, so when we trench through here, we will have a trench box. I think that's what you're describing.
Right.
Will be deep enough that we'll need a trench box in there. And also, you know, we could dig into the back of dump trucks so we're not just putting the spoil piles on the side of the road. So it's kind of a tight spot anyway. So I think we'll have to dig the material into the back of the dump truck. So that's certainly something we could do, and something we want to work with you through the process on.
Will you be coming out and marking exactly how much territory this is going to require? So I got a pretty good idea of where it's going, but I don't know exactly.
We would be happy to meet you out there and walk the site.
Okay,
Terrific.
great. Thank you. That's
Okay.
all I have. Thank you.
And we
You want to
have
take it?
Alice.
Okay. Go right ahead.
Hello, thanks for taking my comment. I'm a graduate student at the University of Maine and I study ecology, and I'd like to second Sonia's comment and say that projects like expanding natural gas pipelines, they really continue our reliance upon fossil fuels, which is super dangerous for our climate. And we might instead see this as an opportunity to move away from fossil fuels and towards green energy. That's all. Thanks.
Thanks for the comment. Any other comments, Bill?
Can I make
No
a?
further hands raised.
Jerry, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'd like to make a closing comment, but certainly let the public speak first. Thank you, Chair.
I think the public has said what they want to say. So go right ahead.
Thank you. So I understand the point about climate change. As a matter of fact, I was actually I worked on the working groups for the Maine Climate Council. The reality is that it's taken humanity a long time to get where it's at related to how we generate electricity and how we use energy, from wood to coal to oil and now natural gas. I don't think natural gas is going to be here forever. Let's just be honest about it. But I do think you're going to see the natural gas industry transition to more renewable sources of natural gas, such as landfill gas, such as hydrogen gas. So I do believe that the natural gas infrastructure, much like the electric grid, is going to move towards more sustainable, cleaner energy sources. And the point about the pipeline is that we're not expanding the capacity of this pipeline. We are replacing the pipeline with the exact same pipeline. Basically, this pipeline supplies everything north of the Stillwater River. And actually, Orono, for all the towns that we serve, actually has the highest number of customers per foot of pipeline of any territory that we in. So we actually have the highest adoption rates in the town of Orono per foot of pipeline than even Bangor. So we certainly appreciate the concern, but don't count us out yet. And certainly this infrastructure could be used for renewable energy into the future. And certainly understand the concerns. So thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. If there are no other questions, we will close this public hearing. And this item will come up again under new business when we take action on the proposed easement. Okay. So then we have on our agenda acknowledgements by council members. And let's just go across the line that I'm looking at. And Laura, you're the first person I see. Do you have any acknowledgements tonight?
Acknowledge the staff of our town that has been keeping us posted and delivering packages to us. So in these COVID times, great to keep us safe by delivering packages. And I thank them for their hard work.
Jeff.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to watch the presentation to the tree board last week on Emerald Ash Borer, and I wanted to thank the tree board for bringing that to the public, and in particular thank the presenters, Cindy Young and Ashley Martone. I thought they did a great job. It was actually the second EAB presentation I heard in 1 week, so I really appreciate that the tree board and the town are getting out ahead of this issue. Thanks.
Cheryl?
While I always appreciate everyone in Orono, I have no acknowledgements tonight. Keep doing what you're doing.
Terry?
Yeah, I just want to kind of remind people of things that are going on primarily this weekend, I guess, coming up. That if you haven't liked Orono Pride on Facebook, I ask that you go do that. And this Saturday, the 15th, from 1 to 5 at the library, they're painting the lion. So they're looking for people who want to come and enjoy that process to please do that. Also a reminder, if you haven't signed up yet, please do so, as we're talking about rivers. So if you're a person who really loves our clean river, 9 a.m. We're doing the street and stream cleanup day. Just go to orono.org to sign up for that, and show your pride in the river and help clean it up. And lastly, from 8 a.m. till noon, there's hazardous waste drop-off day, recycling center in Gilman Falls Road, or Avenue, I guess, in Old Town. So if you have that hazardous waste, here's your opportunity to kind of offload it. Not at Sophie's house, but out there. That's what I have.
Thank you, Terry. Laura?
Yeah, I'm really excited to share that the ad hoc DEI committee has its first meeting date set for May 25th, and their subsequent 2 meetings, June 29th and July 27th. So those will be not public meetings, they're just that committee's meetings, but it's exciting to have those dates in the books and things going, and lead volunteers already stepping up to start that work going. So just kudos to everybody on that. So that's nice. That's
Thank
it.
you. Megan?
Yes, thanks for the shout out for Orono Pride, Terry. Yes, folks who want to paint some more pride, we're adding to the Pride Zoo, growing the Pride Zoo this year. Very exciting stuff. I want to use my acknowledgement time to talk about some of the items that are on the consent agenda. I will not be voting on the consent agenda because my liquor license is on there, so I will be abstaining. However, I wish that I could vote for some items, including our Arbor Day, Pride Month, and Juneteenth proclamations, which are on the consent agenda tonight. And also, I just want to give a special thank you to the community members that apply to be on our boards. We've got new appointments for the Planning Board, Orono-VZ Water District, and the Tree Board tonight. Thank you so much. You know, the folks who are willing to volunteer their time to the town, we're really, really appreciative. And I wish that I could vote yes for you all, but unfortunately I will abstain. But in my heart, I'll be saying yes. Thank you.
Thank you. And I certainly agree. We were very fortunate to have a great group of volunteers step forward for those board positions, and thank our folks who served on the subcommittee to interview them and make some recommendations for us. I would like to recognize Reg Ruin, principal of Orono High School, who is leaving our town to become a superintendent in the Blue Hill area. I think he's been a great addition to the school and to the community, and we're sorry to see him go, but wish him lots of success in his new position. Moving on to unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business? I do not believe we do, Sophie. I see a head shaking. And the consent agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
And a second, please.
Second.
Thank you. There was one item on the consent agenda, Sophie, that was going to be approved with condition. Is that?
We actually wrote the order with the condition.
Great. Thank you. So any questions? We will vote on the consent agenda. And Nancy, will you take a roll call vote, please?
Counselor Gardner,
Abstain?
Counselor Osher,
Approved.
Counselor Grenier,
In favor?
Counselor Perry,
In favor?
Counselor Robertson,
In favor?
Counselor Mitchell,
Yes.
and Counselor Wingard.
In favor.
And there are 6 in favor and 0 opposed and 1 abstention.
And just a reminder to folks, one of the items on the consent agenda is the RSU 26 budget validation referendum warrant that needs to be signed by people. And you ought to give Nancy a call and may find a convenient time to stop by and sign that. We all need to sign it, evidently. Moving on to new business. Order 21-86, order approving ordinance amendment of the Town of Orono ordinances, Chapter 38, Vegetation Ordinance, to repeal and replace the entire chapter. And this is the item that we have talked about. Rob or Sophie, any further comment on it?
Sorry, do I need to?
Yes,
Move?
you do. Thank
I
you.
will move approval.
And a second, please.
Second.
Thank you.
I think that Rob did an amazing job with that overview. If you have any questions, though, we're here to answer it.
Any questions from councilors? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote on order 21-86.
Counselor Gardner,
In favor?
Counselor Osher,
In favor?
Counselor Grenier,
In favor?
Counselor Perry,
In favor?
Counselor Robertson,
In favor?
Counselor Mitchell, and Counselor Wingard.
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor and there are none opposed.
Thank you, Nancy. Moving on to order 21-87, order approving the granting of an easement to Bangor Natural Gas to cross a portion of Webster Park through an easement owned by the town for the Stillwater wastewater interceptor. Could I have a motion, please?
Move approval?
And a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Any comments, discussion? Jeff?
Sorry. Maybe Rob can address this, but this came to me following our discussion, and it had to do with the placement of the cathodic protection. I'm not an engineer and I don't pretend to be, but the question was that a separate apparatus from the pipe itself, Rob, or does that run right in with the pipe?
I believe it's a coating.
I believe
Okay.
so too.
Yeah.
So they
Okay.
can
Very much.
test the pipe.
Yeah.
And another discussion. I'm not convinced that this is the right thing to do at the moment. They didn't convince me that taking the pipes off this bridge that may or may not be replaced in 20 to 25 years is a reason to drill under the river, regardless of how much they say it's safe. I have been told that the bottom of that river across the bridge is a critical habitat. I think Jerry said he was going to get us a report about that. So I don't feel like I have enough information yet to grant them an easement.
Okay.
I think it's really important that this is council's decision, but I do want to just bring your attention to the fact that in the slide deck that we saw, there was a letter from IF&W, which would be the same letter that the town would have to provide if we were going to do a permit by rule or anything like that. So it means that IF&W has looked at the habitat question in terms of, are you thinking like on the banks of the river, Cheryl?
No, I was thinking more in the river, that piece of river itself. I don't have any documentation to prove that at the moment. So I can't I can't validate it. It's just a concern.
Okay, well, the
yeah.
documentation that they have been able to provide to us is the letter from IF&W.
Yeah, I did,
saying
and
that
I did see that. Yeah, I did
Okay.
see that. So yeah, thank you.
And while I still have my mic open, I've asked Roger to pop up because I got a little bit too simple with my order, and he's going to have to suggest an amendment if you guys want to move forward with this.
I would just add perhaps that the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Review may have determined that the fishery wouldn't be impacted because of the location of their work, since they're going to be so far below it and leaving the bank and exiting the bank far enough away. That could be the determination that they made. So they may have said that the fishery was not impacted, not that it didn't necessarily exist. Just to clarify.
Other questions or comments? Yes, Laura.
Yeah, I guess I feel frustrated that we're in this position because of a design flaw that they made. Like, it's not the timing that I think is good, and I don't like the impacts that we're kind of being backed into having to make. Probably the thing that made the most sense to me of just logically is that the lines are safer relatively underground, and that's why they're buried generally. So I that was reassuring to me as compared to them just running under the bridge, which is accessible by anybody that walks under there, which clearly people do. So there are a lot of reasons why I don't feel great about this, but I am comfortable because I feel like it's the only option right now.
Yes, I'd like to echo a lot of those comments. I'm very skeptical. I mean, again, I feel similarly to Laura that, it was very clear from the presentation that there was a design flaw. This is costing them money. It will cost them more money to rebuild it on the bridge and then have to rebuild it again. This is more cost effective for them. I mean, there are a lot of things about this that, yes, clearly it's a corporation and it's doing what benefits a corporation, not necessarily what's going to benefit the town, its residents, or the environment, but they are also working within regulations and under the eye of Maine DEP and IWF. I'm not a fisheries ecologist, and nor do I play one on TV, but I am married to one. The ability that NOAA or that federal wildlife could have to trigger something that would stop this in its tracks. I mean, that's certainly an opportunity that was available to them. If Maine DEP and IWF are signing off on it and there hasn't been any action triggered from the federal government on this issue, I feel comfortable that I wouldn't take Bangor Natural Gas's word for it, but I will take Maine DEP and IWF. Or IFW, I've been saying that wrong the entire time. Now, and on the subject of the folks who brought up very, very good points about climate change, our dependence on fossil fuels, I completely agree with that. I understand that argument. I understand the feeling behind it and the logic and facts behind it. I agree with it completely. The only thing I don't agree with is the statement that this is an opportunity to make a choice for renewable energy, because we don't have a choice to make for renewable energy here. Would I prefer to have more renewable energy choices in this moment? Yes. But one of the things that is the difference between just kind of being able to make your opinions known as a citizen versus having to be the person that makes the decision as a politician, unfortunately, sometimes is that, you know, we can't just make a philosophical point, we also have to find a practical solution. We have a pipeline that is becoming a danger to our town and our environment. How it got that way does not make me happy, but this is the situation we're in right now. And is the best choice to do something to fix it? Yes. The other option, it's not like I have a choice between renewable energy or this pipeline. If we don't allow them to repair this pipeline, how does this play out logically? We cut off service to the town and the area, or we have a natural gas leak, or I mean, there isn't a practical way to address this concern that I share about climate change and reducing or eliminating our dependence on fossil fuels. So in this moment, I feel like this is unfortunately maybe the best option for what we have in front of us. I don't like how we got here, but like Laura, I think I'm at least comfortable enough with inland fisheries and wildlife and Maine DEP being okay with it.
Let me talk a little bit about that too. And I'm involved environmentally with some grassroots organizations. And I work a little bit at the legislative level, providing testimony. There are a lot of lobbyists in Augusta, and IF&W and DEP can sign permits, and they can do pretty much anything they want to. And I'm not saying that they're not always trustworthy, but they're not always trustworthy, and they don't always research enough to sign off on things. And quite frankly, I don't trust them. And so I'd like to see specifically a report specifically that states about this particular area and the impact and the environmental impact on a salmon area in this particular part of the river. So that's an important piece, I think. And also, I wasn't convinced that they're going to repair the pipe regardless. I wasn't convinced that DEP prefers, DOT prefers that the pipe be put underground, but there's all kinds of stuff that's going on underneath that bridge right now, which the two representatives talked about. There's no reason why they can't put a cover under those pipes. They are required to maintain and service those pipelines. And so some of the presentation that we got was just incredibly ambiguous. It was iffy, it was possibly, it was maybe. So I didn't really feel like we got anything concrete, so to speak, about the reasoning to drill under our river. And we are headed toward a more environmentally friendly. We're working on climate action plans right now. We have other infrastructure that needs our attention. So I'm not convinced that going under the river is the right thing to do unless we have to repair the bridge or replace the bridge. And they said it would be 20 years. So I'm not convinced by this particular evening.
Thank you, Cheryl. Any other comments?
Councilor Chair.
Yes.
Um, Sophie suggested that as you know, as the council knows, this is sort of a two-step process. It's not just the granting of the easement, but there's a purchase and sale agreement that is out there that contains actually some fairly important terms. One of which is a purchase price for the easement, and two is a performance bond ensuring that the property is restored to its original condition or as nearly as possible. So I think it may be helpful if the original motion is amended to include the following: as original plus, and approve the town manager's execution of the easement purchase agreement on the terms presented.
Would you say that one more time, please?
Certainly, and it's just at the tail end of the motion, but and approve the town manager's execution of the easement purchase agreement on the terms presented.
Nancy, did you get that written down?
No, I'm sorry, I really didn't.
I think we better do it one more time. I'm sorry, but we want to make sure we get this written down.
So I have it. It's
You do have it, okay.
Yep, and approve the
Town
easement
managers.
purchase agreement, the town manager's execution of the easement purchase agreement as presented.
Okay. So if we are going to add that, it's going to be as an amendment. So let's have a motion to add the amendment, and then we can continue our discussion if we'd like to. Do I have a motion? Did I, Laura?
I had a question, like, can those things be separate instead, or does it have to be together? Because I had questions about the terms that were in there. Like there's dollar figures in there and I don't know, and that has nothing to do with yes or no, let's go ahead with this.
So I think we'd put it all as one item and then ask your questions, I think is the way it would make sense to do that. From a historical perspective, it would make more sense to have it all together. I'm assuming that you would want, if we're going to give an easement, that you would want them to purchase it. We can talk about the elements of that agreement if you'd like.
So now I'm confused. In order to add the language that has been suggested we add, we need to do that by way of an amendment. Okay. So I'm still waiting for a motion.
I make
on the
a motion
amendment.
that we
And Lori
amend.
moves it. And a second, please. Am I going to get a second?
Second.
Okay, I got a second. So now we have a motion and a second. And let's continue the discussion if we need to, and then we'll vote on the amendment, and then we'll vote on the motion as amended. Any further discussion? Laura?
How was the $10,000 derived?
So I had a conversation with Roger that went a little bit like, I have no idea what the going rate for an easement is. Bangor Gas originally had $1 in there, and I didn't think that that was reasonable. And so I asked Roger to use his best guidance, give us his best guidance, and this is the number that came back to me. You'd have to, I would refer to Roger if there was more to that story than him just plopping $10,000 in?
I wish there was more to that story. There is not. But I can tell you that in most cases, Bangor Natural Gas is not paying for its easements across these properties, or at least it's not of public record. Where I did a search to see where these things might show up.
I'll defer to Lori.
Thank you for tacking on some $10,000, because one doesn't seem reasonable. I guess I was concerned about the fact that they're going to be sitting in front of a business in Orono. And so when we had talked last time they came to us, we were concerned about them impacting our park and people who recreate there, but it seems like a lot of impact to that business. And he just mentioned that they already signed an MOU. So I'm hoping that they are in some way compensating that business. And then my thought about underground gas lines versus a gas line on the bridge. And also my first thought is, if they're coming us saying that they think there's a risk and that the risk needs to be minimized by fixing something about the pipeline, I'm encouraging all of us to support the idea that they're going to fix something before it leaks or breaks. And as far as being resilient to climate change, if we had our infrastructure underground, we would be much more resilient to climate change. And under a bridge is better than over the bridge, but I'm in support of putting our infrastructure underground, especially because the drilling technology has gotten so good. We know it's gotten good because of all the drilling people have been doing, or corporations have been doing for fossil fuels, but they can take that technology and use it for something better than getting fossil fuels. In this case, it's moving fossil fuels from one side of the river to the other, but that is an infrastructure that's important for the people who live on the other side of the river that use that fossil fuel. And also, I am concerned that if they came to us saying they want to repair something, because they're not spending money because they are a corporation and their goal is the bottom line. They are not spending money unless they think it's important. And so I'm basically supportive of them putting this in there, but I'm a little concerned about the costs, both to our town and to that business.
Anything else? Are we ready to vote on the amendment? Laura?
Can we have a discussion about the $10,000? Because
Sure.
I think we're having this conversation because of a design flaw they made X number of years ago. And there's costs now for the town, the businesses, the residents. So
I would, excuse me. I would say that if you are not supportive of the $10,000 fee, then you vote against the amendment. And then somebody can propose a different addition to the easement agreement. Does that seem reasonable, Sophie? Okay, then let's take a vote on the amendment.
I'm sorry, Council Chair. Oh, so exactly, we're voting on the cost of the easement.
No, we are voting on the amendment that was proposed by our attorney.
Okay.
And the amendment says, let's read it one more time. Sophie, you have it written down.
Okay.
Would you read that?
If I have it right. Roger, do you have it? So you've got it right there.
Maybe Roger, if you have it right in front of you, maybe you could read it one more time for us.
I'm happy to. And approve the town manager's execution of the easement purchase agreement on the terms presented.
Okay, great. Second question. If I do not approve the easement itself, do I still approve the amendment? I'm not clear exactly what I'm.
Well, I think the amendment says
Okay.
I think the amendment says the as it was presented. We have the easement in our package. So,
Okay.
so we're voting on the easement that was presented to us, I believe. Yes. Okay, so now we're going to vote on the adding the amendment to the motion. So Nancy, if you do a roll call vote for us, please.
Okay.
Counselor Gardner,
She's in favor.
In favor.
Counselor Osher,
In favor.
Counselor Grenier,
In favor.
Counselor Perry,
In favor.
Counselor Robertson,
In favor.
Counselor Mitchell,
I'm still confused. So are we voting for
We're voting to,
including the money part, and this is the whole shebang we're voting
no,
for?
no, we are
Only that
voting,
we're adding in the amendment, only the little part. Okay, I'm in
Correct.
favor.
and Counselor Wingard,
In favor.
and the vote is 7 in favor and there were none opposed.
okay, well, there. So now we're voting on the motion as amended. We've already had it moved and seconded. Any further discussion before we vote on the motion as amended? Then Nancy, would you please do a roll call vote for the motion as amended?
Counselor Gardner,
In favor?
Counselor Osher,
In favor.
Counselor Grenier,
In favor.
Counselor Perry,
In favor?
Counselor Robertson,
I am not in favor of granting an easement.
Counselor Mitchell,
Not in favor due to the $10,000.
and Counselor Wingard.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and 2 opposed.
Okay. Well, thank you for all of your attention and comments and thoughtfulness on this item. So order 21-88. Order authorizing the town manager to sign and execute an agreement with Sargent Corporation of Stillwater, Maine for the North Main Avenue, Chapel Road, College Heights Infrastructure Project in an amount not to exceed $269,455, with funds drawn from the 2020 infrastructure bond proceeds and WPCF sewer replacement reserve. Motion, please.
Move approval?
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you. Rob or Sophie, which do I look to?
I think
I can
you
go.
look to Rob, and I think Joe is available if you need him. His
Okay.
video's just turned off.
So on April 28th, we received bids for this project that involves reconstruction of the roadway, drainage, curbs and sidewalks for North Main Avenue, Chapel Road, and College Heights. We received one bid from Sargent Corporation for the base bid of $1,511,000. We initially were concerned that the scope as we had designed it may push the budget beyond our limits. And so we included an alternate bid for a deduction that would take the road bed on Chapel Road and College Heights from a full reconstruction with geotextile fabric to a reclaim. So you grind it up and use the existing material as the road base and build on top of that. That process is a little less expensive. It's kind of the difference between building a 20-year road and a 15-year road. So it's cheaper with reason, but with the deduction, brought the bid down to what we had originally put 1.3 million toward the project. And so the 1.269 fits well into that budget. Sargent Corporation, hands down, one of the better general contractors in our region, so we're recommending we approve the bid.
Thank you, Rob. Joe, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I have a small portion of that. I mean, mine's about $92,000. I'm gonna change 2 structures and 310 feet of sewer on the far end. They're gonna move it in the road more and put new stubs back to all the residents for the sewer.
Yep. Thank you.
The only thing I noticed about the order is the funding sources. There is a little bit of funds from this current fiscal year to support the work on North Main Avenue. And so I don't know if that needs to be noted, Sophia.
I don't think so yet. When we come back in June, I might need to, but I think it's okay.
Okay. Questions from council? If not, let's do a roll call vote on order 21-88.
Counselor Gardner,
In favor?
Counselor Osher,
In favor?
Counselor Grenier,
First, good to see you, Joe. In favor.
Counselor Perry,
In favor?
Counselor Robertson,
In favor.
Counselor Mitchell,
Yes.
Counselor Wingard.
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor and there are none opposed.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob and Joe. I'm wondering if council members would be agreeable to skipping over item 9, which is council committee reports. In the interest of time tonight, we have quite a bit of business to continue on. Can we hold that off until we meet again?
That works for me.
Yes, that's fine.
Great. Okay, then we will move on to future agenda items or items of concern. Any that people identify? I'm not seeing any. Public petitions, we don't have any. And public comments, do we have any comments from the public? I do not see any. Council discussion. That's your item, I think.
Council
Okay.
Chair Perry, I am wondering if we could move this discussion to the Community Development Committee meeting, which will happen next week on Thursday, the 20th.
I am just fine with that.
Okay.
Consider it done. By fiat. And now we will move on to our workshop.
Let me just give a couple of 1-minute introduction. Roger has already popped up on our screen and given us advice today, but Roger Huber is the town attorney. He is the person that gives us all the great advice. I would just say that Roger works for the town council, and so I think it's important for you to get to know him. And I thought a good way to bring everybody up to speed was to do an elected officials workshop. If we don't get everything in within time tonight, Roger's indicated that he's happy to come back. Or if we have specific questions that we'd like to dig deeper on, we can have him back.
Great. Thank you for being here, Roger.
Well, thank you for having me. And I will offer, I'm not going to take much time offering, but I will offer to come back. If you want to continue your meeting, I know you have an item after mine. And I know that you've got a sundown deadline. So I don't charge for my training. I leave it up to you all.
Why don't we at least get started, Roger?
I'll talk fast.
Good.
All right. Thank you again for the invitation, and my apologies for having canceled earlier. I think having a facial surgery and COVID vaccine on the same day, 2 days before a presentation, is probably a very marginal idea. And while you're all here, thank you for the opportunity to serve in a role as a town attorney. And I know you have a few, and I'm always happy when Sophie calls and asks for my guidance. You will learn tonight that it is her job to appoint the town attorney, but I know she takes her cues from all of you. So I'm just going to assume that nobody has loudly objected to my serving in this role. And so for that, I thank you.
Siren. Good.
My office is on Main Street and the fire trucks come straight down through. It's like a tunnel. For those of you who don't know, I'm a former resident of Orono. I served on the Board of Appeals. I served on the Comprehensive Planning Committee. And if that little white house at the end of Forest Terrace ever goes up for sale, I will be a current resident of Orono. I also just want to say, I know that a number of, I've spoken to a number of you. I think the last time I did this, I think Councilor Gardner had just been elected to the board. So she's probably one of the veterans here. This is really designed for sort of newcomers, but as a refresher for the rest of you. We have limited time. Sophie, I assume you will give me some signal to tell me you need to take on that last item of business so that you can meet your deadline. I'm going to share my screen. I thought this will be my first PowerPoint presentation ever. But I thought this might be the quickest way to, I thought this might be the quickest and easiest way to get the information across. So there's just 4 primary topics, one of which is the function of municipal governments. 2, the Freedom of Access Act. 3, conflict and bias, and finally, liabilities and immunities. That first, functions of municipal officers, I'm just going to breeze through. It's kind of a civics 101 lesson. You probably already are aware of it. Items 2 and 3, those are the items that the state wants you to be aware of. And liabilities, immunities, I assume those are the items that you want to be aware of. So I'm going to spend most of my time on items 2 through 4. And as Sophie says, if we get halfway through, I'll just come back another time and we'll finish up. Couple forms of government. There's the direct form of government where the legislative body is the town meeting. You folks are in the representational form where the legislative body is simply elected to a town or a city council. Under the direct representational form, you've got town meeting with a select board, you've got town meeting with a select board with a town manager, you've got town meeting with a town administrator. There's all forms of different sort of representational governments. You all, obviously, a council mayor or a council manager form of government. And that just means there certain rules apply to you that might not apply to other municipalities. Just by way of background, all Maine cities and approximately 25 towns follow the same structure of government that Orono has. It has to be enacted through a town charter, which you have done. The council, all of you serve as the legislative and the executive functions. There are there, it is your responsibility as the council, and we'll go through this in just a bit, to set the priorities and to hire the town manager to carry out those priorities. You obviously are answerable to the people who elected you, and the town manager is responsible and answerable to all of you. So I just want to go through sort of the functions of the municipal officers in your form of representational government, Orono's form of representational government. Obviously, you've got the executive, legislative, and quasi-judicial functions that you fill. In terms of the executive function, your town charter is the town's constitution. That's what I look to when Sophie calls with legal questions. That's what controls all of our behaviors. In Orono, all of the powers are vested in the town council. There's no town meeting. There's no other source. You are an all-powerful legislative body. Your executive functions are limited because of the form of government. For the most part, the town manager gets to execute the executive functions, but that's not 100% of the case. But as in this form of government, the town manager is the chief administrative officer, and when you're dealing with administrative issues, that falls to Sophie, the town manager. Just quickly, and really for the newcomers, the categories of executive functions: council management of municipal finances, protecting the health and welfare of the residents, managing public property, and to a very limited extent, personnel, management of contracts with other state and local agencies. And it is the executive function of the council to fill boards, hire the town manager, and fill the boards, as I think you may have done some bit tonight. So that's sort of the limit of your executive functions. That's not your big one. You are primarily a legislative body. Obviously, you're enacting the ordinances, the regulations. You're adopting the policies for yourselves and for the community and for people in your employ. And you're also enacting bylaws to govern the town council's behavior. So those are your legislative functions. I'm going to over home rule, except to say there's a statute, there's a home rule that gives you sort of home rule authority, which basically allows the town of Orono, all towns, all municipalities, to govern themselves without interference from state government. I'm going to skip the legislative functions because it's just not all that interesting. But you do have some quasi-judicial functions. You approve certain permits. You act as you will tonight as an appeals board or a poverty abatement review board. You will on occasion deal with dangerous building actions. So there are things that you do that are sort of quasi-judicial in nature. Obviously, there are other boards in the town of Orono that also deal in that capacity, most notably the Board of Appeals and the Board of Assessment Review. let's just jump right into the free. That's it for the civics lesson. So let's jump into the Freedom of Access Act, which I think is that and the conflict issue, which the state really wants you to hear about. FOA is it's the Freedom of Access Act. It's a state statute, and it is intended to open the government of Maine and guaranteeing that the citizens can not necessarily be involved, but can see what their government is doing. You will on occasion hear of the Freedom of Information Act, which is a similar statute, but it deals with federal agencies as opposed to state agencies. FOIA is a federal law. FOA is a state law. There are two general categories, and we'll talk about these both briefly. There are public proceedings and there are public records. And those are the two big categories for the Freedom of Access Act. Public proceedings are the transactions of any functions affecting any or all citizens of the state by designated entities, including boards, commissions, municipalities, and school districts. So obviously tonight was a public proceeding. This is the council meeting is a public proceeding. You are transacting the business of the town of Orono, and therefore it comes under the rubric of the Freedom of Access Act. Public proceedings include public meetings where you may not necessarily be transacting business, but you are discussing the town's public business. The public meeting requirements apply to any board or agencies with 3 or more persons. And noteworthy, it applies to membership, not attendance. So if you've got a 3-member board of assessment review, which you do, and one is absent, well, you don't have 3 or more persons, but the board itself is comprised of 3 or more persons. So anytime those two meet to transact business, it is a public proceeding and a public meeting. Subcommittees are fairly unique. You may have a subcommittee of 2 members of the council, and you may direct that subcommittee to study something and get back to the council, and that those 2 members may meet as their subcommittee. I think they're doing the business of the council, and so I would treat them as if it is a public meeting, and we'll talk about the requirements, but primarily notice of that and the right to attend those subcommittee meetings by the public. I'm going so fast. I assume somebody will raise their hand if they are. Of course, I can only see 4 of you, so I hope it's one of those top 4.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I understood that by law that if 3 council members meet together, that it's considered a public meeting. So this is a much more strict requirement that if 2 council members meet together, that is considered a public meeting.
If 2 council we'll discuss this in a moment, but if 2 council members meet on the street, that's not a public meeting. But I have always taken the view that if 2 members of the council meet to transact business as a subcommittee of the whole.
Yeah, so this is different than our practice, Roger. So we're going to need some guidance because that's not the way we've done in the past.
Yeah, and that's okay. I mean, there's a couple ways to look at it. But if you set up a subcommittee of two, the way I look at it is, if you set up a subcommittee of two people to do the business of and report back to the council, and they get together for a meeting to discuss that, I think the best practice is to notify that so that the public at least would be aware.
Well, it seems that we've been in violation of that because I haven't been involved in this, but I know that other pairs of counselors have worked on things together to bring forward to the council. And that has been very valuable to the council and has allowed them to develop things that we as a council have been able to move forward with. And there's not been public announcements about that, although it during the meeting in which it was said that these two people would go off and work on something, that means that the public was made aware that if they're interested, those are the two counselors to speak with. But the public, our town manager does a very good job of making sure that we're in compliance with public meeting notification and is quite rigorous about how many days in advance of something we need to make sure people are told. And this just seems like it's be putting a lot more work onto our town manager for something that's been very useful in moving things forward and not bogging down the way in which we do business.
Your town manager does a phenomenal job of counting days and providing notice. And as I say, there's not a case out there that talks about the obligation to provide notice for those two committee members to meet. As I say, there's two ways. There are not three counselors. That's one argument. The other argument is you've got two counselors from a group of more than three, and they are doing the work of the council. So, I'm not particularly charged up about it, but I would say that it's probably a good practice to provide some notice. As you say, Councilor Osher, the people are aware that those two counselors are going to work together, and that's who they should contact should they have any questions or issues. That's certainly a huge step in the right direction. So, failure to give notice, I don't think is a violation. I just think it's a good practice to provide notice anytime two or more get together to discuss public business.
I guess I'm just asking if the notice we give now by having it mentioned during a meeting that people were going to be talking, is that the kind of notice you talk about? Or you're talking about some kind of written or?
Yeah, he's talking about having like a notice of the meeting posted to tell people how they can view it. And I'm gonna need to circle back with Roger to talk specifically about a couple of things we have ongoing. But this definitely brings up a difference in the way I understand it. So I think Roger and I need to chat a little bit, and then I can come back in one of my manager's updates and share either that we're good or that we need to change how we do things, if that's okay with folks.
And
Makes perfect sense.
Specifically, can we, because I think a lot of the examples that Lori might be thinking of, I mean, there are some examples where we've formed an actual subcommittee, but I think a lot of the examples she might be thinking of, we didn't actually form any kind of a formal subcommittee. It was just two counselors having phone conversations or something like that. So I would like to hear specifically about, the difference between formally creating a subcommittee and just two counselors who are working on an issue together, in notifying notifying the public that it's happening and to contact them, but not having formal meetings.
Councilor Gardner, I think hit the distinction right on. I'm thinking of formal subcommittees being formed to study an issue. I am not, let's be clear, I'm not talking about two counselors getting together or even having the council say, why don't you two work on this and get back to us? I mean, that's different than establishing a formal committee where they're going to take, where they're going to take evidence or listen to public input, those types of things. Councilor Gardner, I think you just broke the log jam on that one. Thank you. Anything else on that front? Councilor Osher was saying, I'm not even going to go through the public notice requirements because Sophie does such an amazing job on that front. Important only to know that there is something going on in the background, that there are requirements and that people are, that there are deadlines, that there are deadlines that the town has to satisfy, but the council is fortunate that you've got somebody like Sophie in the background making sure that happens. In case you don't know, no public meeting can occur without at least some type of notification, and sometimes it happens in I don't know what the last emergency was in Orono, but sometimes it really is a call to the press to say, listen, we've got to meet this afternoon at 3 o'clock. We're just letting you know. Something has to happen in order for some sort of notice has to occur, even in an emergency situation. All that being said, obviously the town can meet in executive session. It's kind of nuanced, and I'm not sure all that important, but there are things that are public, non-public proceedings, and then there are executive sessions. I think technically after this workshop, I think the town is meeting in a non-public proceeding to deal with a poverty abatement or some sort of an abatement. And that is one of several types of things that must be in a non-public setting. As to say, general assistance matters, some concealed weapons, permitting matters, and then poverty abatements. Those are sort of the big ones. Those are non-public proceedings, things that must be done outside of the public and for which certain precautions have to be taken to make certain that the discussions and the parties involved are not disclosed publicly. But again, Sophie and her team do a great job of managing that end of the process. Contrast that with executive session. Statute says that a council, everything is a public proceeding or a public meeting unless there is unless you can hit one of the or check one of the executive session exemptions, and those are there's a couple pages now in the statute. It seems to be getting a little bit broader longer, I should say, each year. But it really, and I know all of you have been involved with these already. Personnel matters, economic, real estate development, where disclosure of discussions might impair the town's ability to negotiate, labor contracts, and then sort of the broad one, the meetings between the board and its attorneys or attorney to discuss the rights and obligations of that board on a particular matter. So obviously you can, I mean, everything's a public proceeding unless you trigger one of these executive sessions. How to go into executive session, Chair Perry seems to, I'm sure is well aware of how this works, and I know that Sophie is as well. obviously the motion has to go into public. You need to make a public motion to go into executive session. That motion needs to contain certain information, including a citation to the statute, but you can't put so much detail in there that it might necessarily disclose either the person involved or the content of the discussions, or, depending on what the context is. You have to maintain a record of the motion and the vote. I think what's most important for the council members to remember is you cannot discuss anything else in executive session except that which was approved for the purpose of the executive session, rather. It's so easy, and it's so I've been in hundreds of these, and it's so easy to get sidetracked from one item to the next, and it seems like such a small thing because it's just the 7 of you or just the 3 of you in a really small back room, and it seems like an easy time, and no one's going to know if you just discuss something else. But it can be embarrassing to the community. It can result in overturning or at least voiding the decision. It's just good practice not to discuss anything except that which you are approved to discuss. Executive session is for discussion purposes only. No votes, no decision, no final action. Question whether you can take sort of a straw poll. Every town does.
Can I? Sorry, I had my hand up, and I don't know if you can see me. So it says written record of motion and vote. What? Oh, what's going on? Okay. And then it says no votes, decision, or final action.
I'm sorry. It's a record. You need to make a written motion, a record of the motion to go into executive session and the vote. You need to record that.
Okay.
Okay. And then there's a vote to come out of executive session. Great question. What goes on in executive session stays in executive session. There's no memorializing that except in certain sort of limited situations. Thank you. Good question.
Roger, can you just briefly speak to the difference between formal action, taking votes, and giving direction? So, for example, if the town was going to go purchase or sell some property, we might want to be in an executive session because I would want to know what the council had appetite for. Can you speak just to the difference between a vote and direction?
Absolutely. The council is not, let's take that scenario. The council would not be precluded from discussing the purchase and telling you or asking you to go out and continue your negotiations along certain terms. But the vote to actually purchase the property has to be done in public. So the council can give you as much direction as they want and send you off on your way, but there can be no formal vote to purchase. But yeah, no, those discussions, especially with respect to negotiations, property negotiations, send you on your way with all sorts of direction. Continuing with the Freedom of Access Act, the public is entitled to attend, or in this case, log into your public proceedings, but they are not necessarily given the right to speak at those hearings. Attendance, and I mean, not every meeting is a public meeting, or I mean, they're all public meetings, but they're not, that doesn't mean that people necessarily have a right to speak at those hearings. The council, all your boards have a fair bit of discretion in limiting public participation and as they need to have, but only actually in a public hearing are people entitled to speak. And I know that the council gives, as the Orono Council I noted tonight, as most councils do, have a spot on their agenda for public comment. But outside of that, it's public has the right to attend, but not necessarily participate in the proceedings. Just a sort of a quick rundown of the common violations. Discussing substantive town business via email, social media, or other means. In this day and age, I bet Orono is very good. I get to, I will tell, I represent probably 23 municipalities. Orono is the most sophisticated one of all of them. And I don't think I live in fear that there's going to be a, yes.
Yeah, I guess I'm confused by your first bullet. Like, with who is it a violation to discuss town business via email, social media, or other means? With
each other as part of your as role. So an email stream with all 7 counselors discussing public business is not appropriate.
But between two?
Between two, probably okay. Between a counselor and a citizen, definitely okay.
Okay. Okay. So I think the limit that we had defined for this was also 3. Same for the meetings, right? Yeah. Okay.
You would be surprised at the number of towns that conduct business over email. It just seems easier when people sort of work remotely. A selectman will send around, you know, anybody have any problems with this, and they're taking votes via email. I'm certain that does not happen in the town of Orono. The other sort of common violations, that meeting by chance, 3 counselors talking about business at Bear Brew or Margaritas, it can be a violation. Unadvertised meetings, unadvertised workshops, failure to provide sufficient notice, and improper executive session. Those are your big violations, but again, you guys are in great hands with Sophie and her team, making certain that at least the improper executive session doesn't occur and insufficient notice doesn't occur. But counselors really need to be on the lookout to make certain that what the business they conduct is out in the open. Public records, again, it's sort of the state wants you to know about them. Most everything, the most everything that the town produces should be considered a public record. There are a number of documents that are not public records. But again, these are the request for public records will go into the town manager's office, and much of this won't be seen by you. But it's important to understand that most everything that the town produces constitutes a public record. But there are a number of exemptions to that requirement. There's a number of statutes that designate documents as confidential. A lot of personnel information is not confidential or is confidential. Medical records also confidential, don't constitute public records.
Roger, can I stop you for just a second?
Sure.
This was really one of the only questions that I had, and with our new Zoom platform, right? I was noticing on one meeting, wasn't a council meeting, but on one meeting, that the chats were recorded and showed up as a written record on my desktop. So if there's chatting going on during a council meeting, is that considered a public record?
Yes. Yes, the hearing itself is recorded. I think I would consider it as simply somebody speaking in the audience. It occurred at the public hearing. It's part of the public record. I would consider that absolutely part of that public record.
And because chatting you can limit to individual people. So how does that translate as well as a public record?
Sophie, what do you pick up? What does the recorder pick up? Does the recorder pick up your message to me asking me if I'll?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Bell gets a copy of all of that. I will tell you that the planning board has asked us to disable the chat function, except for and use a different platform for people to chat or to communicate. And we need to have a conversation with Council Chair Perry. I just wasn't comfortable doing that without talking with him. But I think more towns are doing that because Bell does keep the record of the chats. We have that and can produce it upon request, but something a lot of towns are just turning off because it's that kind of chat in the background that you probably wouldn't pick up during a regular meeting.
Right. I don't know what's going to happen with Zoom. The ability to hold your meetings via Zoom, I think extends only so long as the governor's emergency order. But I know that there is a legislative move afoot to make that a more permanent option in some circumstances. I think many have found it, many towns have found it useful. It can be kind of cumbersome. I'd much rather be facing you all tonight. But it's, at least for now, it's part of our reality. I'm gonna skip I know you have I'm going to skip to the liability section. And I just want to skip to the liability section. And because I think sometimes this is the biggest concern that new counselors in particular have. First of all, we've got the Maine Tort Claims Act, which provides tremendous amount of protection from negligence for municipalities and for municipal officers. For the most part, the statute says that as a general rule, municipalities aren't liable for negligent acts and other sort of acts. That is that the town has immunity except in very limited circumstances. And I've listed those circumstances here: highway defects, road construction, things that are happening during the road construction, sudden and accidental discharge of pollutants. But the Tort Claims Act says you've got this broad immunity, except in these limited circumstances. The limits of the town's liability, $400,000 unless the town has insurance for more. And the areas of specific immunity include legislative, quasi-judicial, discretionary acts, prosecutorial acts, a code officer's decision to bring an enforcement action against somebody, but not somebody else. And you also have immunity should you acquire property and not take possession of that property. You do have liability after 60 days, but for the most part, the town has a tremendous amount of protection. Unfortunately, for municipal officers, there is no general rule of immunity, but there are bits and pieces of statutes that have sort of been pieced together, and it's accepted that municipal officers have immunity in areas involving legislative acts, quasi-judicial acts, discretionary acts, and prosecutorial acts. And obviously you have to be operating within the scope of your authority. But if you are doing these things, you will almost be certainly found to be operating within the scope of your authority. This is sort of the summary for the freedom of access law, but to avoid liability, give notice, keep good records. But really, for the municipal officers, you need to act in good faith within the scope of your authority and with a public good in mind. And it's really just that easy. And there are so very, very few cases of municipal officers being held liable for any of their actions, and none of them involve legislative or quasi-judicial or discretionary acts. So while you don't have specific general liability or general immunity, you've got a tremendous amount of statutory protection. Councilor Mitchell?
Yeah, what's a discretionary act that the council takes?
What's a good example? Every day.
So would you say that a decision to take action or not take action, like on a dangerous building, Roger?
I would say that would fall under certainly a quasi-judicial act. If you decide not to do, or discretionary, certainly that's a discretionary act. You decide, you've got the discretion. I could bring it or I don't have to bring it. I choose not to. You're not going to be held responsible for that decision in either event. Yeah, that would fit under two categories. I feel like I totally rushed that, but I keep looking at my watch, and I know your sundown is 7:50 or 7:54, and I know you have another. Matter after this.
So this might be a good place for us to stop, Roger, and take you up on your offer to come back if we would like to ask some more questions or get some more insight.
And it's really easier if we just if any narrow issues you want to discuss, happy to come up for an hour. half hour, whatever, just to discuss any issue. I don't charge to train my boards. So,
We appreciate that.
all right.
Thank you very much for your time. We really do appreciate it, and we look forward to talking with you again.
All right. Good luck with the rest of the meeting.
Thanks.
Thanks, Roger.
So item 15, I guess we're actually going to go into a non-public session as opposed to an executive session, based on what I heard tonight. So I'd like a motion to enter into a non-public session to consider a request for poverty abatement based on poverty or disability.
So moved.
In a second. Yeah.
Everybody should have the link to the new meeting on their email. I resent it during our meeting.
So we need to leave this meeting. Why don't we vote on the motion?
Oh, sorry.
And we'll leave the meeting and then we'll come back. So can we do this by raising our hands, I hope?
Yeah.
I see.
No.
No.
Sorry.
All right. Roll call vote.
Counselor Gardner.
In favor?
Counselor Osher.
In favor?
Counselor Grenier.
In favor.
Counselor Perry.
In favor.
Counselor Robertson.
Yes, in favor.
Counselor Mitchell.
Yes.
Counselor Wingard. Yep, okay. So we'll leave this and I'm just gonna start my next meeting.
Okay. We're off.
Cheryl, are you guys all coming back? Okay.
Okay, looks like we're all back. So we have order 2189. Order approving the request for property tax abatement based on poverty or disability. Number 2021-001. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
Move approval, but I think we're missing Laura. I mean, there can be 6
Well,
of
let's
us.
have, yeah, oh, yes, she is. And a second.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? We'll take a roll call vote on the order then.
Counselor Gardner,
In favor?
Counselor Osher,
In favor?
Counselor Grenier,
In favor.
Counselor Perry,
In favor?
Counselor Robertson,
In favor?
Counselor Mitchell,
Yes.
Counselor Wingard.
In favor.
And I just want to remind, that's 7 in favor, none opposed. I just want to remind folks that the topic of the executive session is confidential and should not be discussed outside of executive session or our non-public proceeding.
There. So any other business to come before us tonight, and I hope not. Thank you all for hanging in there on a long evening. Got a lot done, and I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second. In this one, we're going to raise our hands on. See you all Thursday.